Hello and welcome to our study in 1 Peter. I'm Phil Robertson, joined by Dr. Mark Lloyd Jr. Oh, were you going to introduce yourself?
I thought you were going to have
Go
me
ahead,
here
introduce yourself.
I'm fine.
You sure?
I'm Mark. Hi.
This is our first time to do this.
Yes.
We don't know what we're doing, apparently.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but how you doing?
I'm doing good.
All right.
We had a good lunch together again today.
Yes,
Something
yes,
we do
did.
each whatever day we're filming this.
And we actually didn't even talk about the study today at all, so this ought to be interesting.
Yes.
I did, since we are talking about suffering, I wore my Texas Tech shirt. So, at Texas Tech, we know a little about suffering with our football team. We got demolished.
Did you?
Oh, man, Texas put 70 on us.
Oh.
So, sorry. But,
Oh.
yeah, it was rough.
I'm sorry.
But we'll be fine.
Yes.
We'll be fine. We're used to it. But I did get a very nice picture from Miss Maya. So, she's taking care of me. Look how tall I look in the picture. Did you notice that?
Yes.
Yes. She is my friend. So, did you draw a picture while I was preaching Sunday?
No, but I have one at the house. While you were taking your notes, I just went ahead and drew some pictures.
That's what you did? All right. Well, we're in 1 Peter, and if you've been following along with us in this study, we know that Peter is preparing Christians for a fiery trial. And today we actually get to the fiery trial.
Not only do we get to it, he just, what we say in this day and age, he put it on them as far as preparation. And there's some heavy things we're going to talk about in this passage.
Well, we're in 1 Peter chapter 4, and I'll read in verse 12 here in just a moment. But really what's been so powerful about the study is all along, Peter is definitely preparing Christians for a great persecution, but he hasn't focused on the persecution or the ones who are causing the persecution. He's focused upon the Christians.
Yes.
And he's, in essence, telling them, as well as he's speaking to us, so we keep that in mind, what the persecution is really doesn't matter as much as how you handle it. And he begins with attitude, he begins with purpose, and then today he really gives us the Christian view of persecution. And it is something, it is very powerful. So you ready to get into it?
Yes, let's go.
All right. Verse 12, 1 Peter 4, Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you. But rejoice insofar as you share Christ's suffering, that you may also rejoice and be glad when His glory is revealed. If you are insulted for the name of Christ, you are blessed, because the Spirit of glory and God rest upon you. But let none of you suffer as a murderer or a thief or an evildoer or a meddler. Yet if anyone suffers as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God in that name. For it is time for judgment to begin on the household of God. And if it begins with us, what will the outcome for those be who do not obey the gospel of God? And if the righteous is scarcely saved, what will become of the ungodly and the sinner? Therefore, let those who suffer according to God's will entrust their souls to a faithful Creator while doing good. What a passage. And Peter certainly knows something about suffering. I think we can certainly attest to that. While he may have been trying to run from it when Jesus was around, he's in the midst of it now. And he's already been beaten. He's possibly already been imprisoned by the time this letter is shared. And who knows what all he's enduring at the moment he's sharing this letter.
He's going to tell them, I don't know if it's the same people, but he's going to say to us in 2 Peter that my time may be tomorrow. It could be here right now. And I am prepared for it. And that's what he's doing here. I think he's preparing these people for this fiery ordeal, which they may have already been started in. They may know full well what he's talking about when they receive this or get this letter, or the signs may be there that they know it's going to be coming soon, and it's happening to him. So he's a fellow sufferer with them right now.
The fiery trial. Is this a little bit of a foreshadowing, or is it something that's referring to what's already happened with respect to Rome?
It certainly, it would be subtle at best if he's using this term fiery when it was a fire that burned Rome, and the Christians were the ones who were said that had done it by Nero. So it's interesting that he's using that term here, and I'm going to guess that Rome is going to do to others what's happened to them.
Right.
And so if you're going to burn us, we're going to burn you. So it's truly a term here that has some meaning to them.
Well, we know that the Nero persecution was intense, and Christians were pretty much the public enemy number one of the state. If you flip over to the end of 1 Peter, you'll notice that he makes reference to the idea of a Babylon, and so we are understanding to some degree that, I think Peter is pointing us toward this idea of maybe Rome is that Babylon, as well as John, if you want to use that symbolism when you get to the Revelation. But suffering can come in many shapes and forms. It's not just physical suffering, emotional suffering. It can be being just maligned with words, or any kind of abuse that can come even verbally or emotionally that Christians are enduring here.
I think he's trying to prepare them for all. Certainly he is trying to prepare some of those who may die from this, and may even account for some deaths of brethren. But it's going to be all those things. There's going to be huge emotional upheaval in them if they have family members who may have died or may have been taken off to prison. Or yes, the church is going to be affected adversely. And I think he's trying to prepare all these brethren for whatever is going to happen to them. This is how I want you to accept this, and this is how I want you to suffer.
All right, if you look at it, I want to share just 4 things that I think are shared in this passage here that speak to the Christian view of persecution. And this comes, I believe, just straight from the text. And these are Peter's points. The Christian view of persecution begins with number 1 in verse 12, expect it. It's not strange. Don't consider it strange. And I go, oh man, I'm the first one really here to suffer. No, if you're a child of God, you're always going to be expecting kickback, pushback, the idea of suffering for your faith. Jesus said that when he sent out the apostles on the limited commission. Get ready for it.
He certainly told them that in John 17.
Yeah.
When he's preparing him for what's really coming, he said, look, I'm going to suffer. You are my disciples. You are my followers. You will suffer.
Secondly, he says, don't just expect it, but rejoice in it. This was the path of your Lord Jesus. Rejoice and be glad, especially when his glory is revealed. You are suffering for the Lord, and we certainly saw rejoicing in Peter and Paul when they suffered for the first time, and I think that attitude probably continued.
As I look at this from a human nature standpoint, I can say to myself, okay, I'm a Christian, I need to expect this.
Right.
Now, that's taking it a step up.
Yeah.
When we're not only expecting it, but now we are to rejoice in it. He's having to prepare those. You have to prepare yourself in this situation to rejoice in this situation, because he's going to tell us why we need to rejoice as we go along. And he's told us before that this is what's happened to Christ. You are participating in his suffering. And our apostles rejoiced. We have that example. And now you're going to need to rejoice. But when you're talking about that to the average person, that's a little more difficult.
Sure. Well, and isn't it interesting, too? We're so good about sometimes preaching this sermon, or we say to somebody else, Mark, you just really need to forgive them. Yeah. That's what the Lord tells you to do. I know you were done wrong, but you just need to get over it and forgive them and shake it off. I know it hurt. Well, that's easy for me to say until
it happens to you.
It's my turn, and then I'm like, well, no. No, this really hurts, or they haven't apologized like I want them to, or it hasn't been, then it's different.
Yes.
But
he's saying here it's not.
It's not.
No, it's not
different.
Every one of us need to be prepared, and as we understand what's happening here, and this is God involved in God's will, we need to understand that we need to be rejoicing because we're part of God's will here.
The third point would be evaluate it. Look at your suffering, Peter says. Make sure you're not suffering because of your own consequences, the consequences that come from your own actions.
Yes.
Now, I thought this was kind of interesting. He uses not as a murderer or a thief or an evil. Well, that's going to be a small minority, hopefully, especially from the household of faith
that are
going to be a murderer. But
Yeah.
but you could murder somebody's character. You could steal somebody's joy and be a thief. You could meddle in other people's business and cause harm. There's many forms, if you will, and I've often wondered if he wasn't necessarily just talking about somebody who committed literal murder as much as this is kind of symbolic in the same way that the fiery trial is symbolic.
Well, that fourth one there certainly can be any of us, that troublesome meddler.
That troublesome meddler,
Yes.
that's easy. But evaluate your suffering.
Yes.
Why am I hurting? Could it be my own doing more than it is me suffering for the kingdom's
Yes.
sake? So be honest with yourself. But then the fourth way that a Christian views persecution is use it. Let it draw you closer to the Lord. Let it draw you in to Him. Understand that the Lord's going to bring judgment on all of us, but to those who are faithful, it's the day that the Lord makes it clear, I know what you went through. I know how you endure. I know the sparrow that falls. I know you. And if you suffer as a faithful child of God, what a blessing to stand before the Lord with that. And so let it draw you closer to God.
Most of us are drawn closer to God when we are in a bad situation. Mm-hmm. I mean, that seems to be the natural thing. Even people who are not following God, mm-hmm. and you're in a bad situation, suddenly you're looking for something to hold on to, and many times people will turn to what they consider to be their God. Mm-hmm. Lord, I haven't been as I should be, but under these circumstances, please be with me and help me. That's what we're supposed to be doing, but he's saying here, as a faithful child of God, that should be drawing you closer to Him, because that's what we need to be doing. Use that to get closer to God.
And in an odd way, then, an insult, a stab in the back, a criticism because of your faith, or it can sometimes be a blessing as well as a curse. Does that make sense? Pain in that way, if it draws us closer to God, it did us some good. There's a book that I really love written by Jim McGuigan, and it's the idea of suffering. Suffering is not always bad. In fact, sometimes it should be celebrating. And he titled the book Celebrating the Wrath of God, which leads us to the curse of sin, the challenges of sin. Well, if it brings me back to God and draws me in closer, then I should celebrate that. And that seems odd.
And many times that's what the Lord intends. When things happen to you, mm-hmm. you're to use that to bring you back closer to God. Whether God has caused it or not, you can use that. He can use that situation to have you come closer to Him again.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes.
Put on your physician hat. So
okay.
Take off your pastor hat and let's put a physician. What happens to the body when we're suffering? You're a rheumatologist. You know how people deal with arthritis and all kinds. What happens to us?
Physiologically, things do happen to you when you're in a stressful situation. There's no doubt about it. The adrenal gland starts to put out epinephrine and things of this nature, and you get excited. Heartbeat goes up, pressure goes up. A lot of things happen to you when you're suffering. And then if it's a prolonged suffering, there's mechanisms that your body tries to do to sort of counteract that. But the body is there. The Lord has made us in such a way that it's a flight or fight type of thing.
Right, yeah.
And many times with this idea of suffering, how do I get away from it? Now that's how we're made. Interestingly enough here, as a Christian, sometimes we may have to fight that flight or fight type of attitude if you are if you're right there at the moment, it may be that peace that God has given you may be the thing that needs to overcome you and settle you down. But the body does react to suffering. I mean, it's the way we're made.
Well, and there isn't something in Scripture that tells you that, okay, because you're suffering, that you just hunker down and enjoy it. No, there is a point where you shake the dust off your feet and you move on if you can. I don't think the point here that Peter's making is, enjoy suffering, stay right in there, and if you die, you die. No, there's still some common sense in there.
Remember what Jesus was telling his apostles, his disciples, at the destruction of Jerusalem.
Right.
Many of you may still be in Jerusalem, and what is he saying? Guys, see all the signs. Don't stay there. Get out. So the Lord allows you times to escape if there's a situation that you may be able to get out of. This appears to be a situation which you're not going to get out of. Wherever you flee, as far as the Romans were concerned, we're going to find you because you're a Christian. The only way you could get out of this fiery ordeal would be to say, I'm not a Christian. That's exactly what he is saying here. You accept the fact that you're a Christian, you wear that name, and whatever happens to you, then you honor that name.
And here's what's kind of neat. This is one of 3 times Christian is used in Scripture. It's used by those probably of the community, referring to brethren in Acts as being they were first called Christians, at Antioch. And so it was more likely the community was calling them Christians. You see Agrippa saying that to Paul, you persuade me to become a Christian. And Peter uses it here. It's not so much that this became the moniker from the standpoint of what brethren refer to themselves, but more what the community refers to them as. These are those Christ followers. Not a bad moniker by any stretch of the imagination, but you suffer for the name of Christ.
That's what the people are going to be calling you who are going to come in here to cause you to suffer. Those who are persecuting you. You Christian. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's probably the term that they were using. You've been labeled as a Christian. And so if you're suffering as that label, then don't be ashamed.
Yeah. All right, let's get to the challenging one. And you didn't jump on it, so I'll go ahead and throw it to you then. Just because you
I really wanted to.
Oh, you really did. If the righteous are scarcely saved. What? I thought righteous were saved. If you're righteous, you're saved. How are you scarcely saved if you're righteous?
I'm not so sure that scarcely. I know you have a newer translation there. It goes back up to me in verse 17. I thought that was the one you were going to ask me. For it is time for judgment.
Oh, well, that one to me wasn't the harder one as this
to
one.
To begin with the household of God. I mean, there's a judgment coming down on Christians here, on the household of God. Is it God's judgment? Is it the Roman judgment? Or is it God's judgment and I'm going to allow this to happen? But he does go on to say, if you think it's bad for the household of God right now, what do you think it's going to be for those who have not obeyed the gospel of God? If he's allowing this kind of persecution to happen to us, God help those who have ignored the gospul of God. Well, it's going to be a real fiery ordeal.
Well, I've heard it explained kind of like this, though. This is the way I look at that verse, but you still haven't answered your question. I'm going to get back to you in a moment. Don't think I forgot.
That's right.
But for the child of God, the one who loves the Lord and serves the Lord and does not deny his name, this earth is the only hell they will ever know. This is it.
That's the worst judgment you're going to have against you.
Living on this earth is going to be the worst hell. But for the person who does not obey the gospel, this earth is the only heaven they will know. To me, that was the big point that he was trying to make there. All right, you ready to get back to that question
Let's get
you're trying to avoid?
No, I was not.
I'm not persecuting you. I'm just
I just thought
giving you the option to answer first.
I needed 17 to explain 18. That's what I was trying to do.
All right. So, the righteous is scarcely saved.
If you take it at the surface, I do not think that it means that we're scratching and clawing and we just barely make it as far as getting to heaven. That we're just going on a string and a hope and a rope. I don't think that's what he's talking about there. I like my translation a little bit better where it says with difficulty that the righteous is saved. I think that very much. It is saying to me that us being saved is coming at a price.
Right.
And that it's not peaches and cream. It's not maybe all that simple as far as the life that you're living. You may come into situations that are going to be very difficult for you, but you can make it.
Yeah.
And that's how I take it.
Well, and I think that's the point. I think it's the idea, not talking about saved, redemption, atonement, salvation, the way we generally think of it. We're thinking about how somebody endures and deals with life. The fact of the matter is everybody suffers.
Yes.
Christian, non-Christian, the whole earth suffers. Now, Christians will suffer for their faith. That's a given. But can you imagine living this life without any hope of eternity? Can you imagine living without hope that the evildoer will one day get judged? Can you imagine living without the hope that justice would never be rendered, that those who lived evil and persecuted and hurt people just got off scot-free? That would be horrible. A world without justice. So to the godly, it's tough.
Yes.
But you'll make it.
You'll make it. Yes.
You'll make it. But imagine being the ungodly, that this world is all they know. And it's a tough existence at times.
Well, and you've heard the stories, and I've even seen it myself. The godless person, the one without God on the earth, when it comes to his death, there's not many of those who go at this with peace in their heart. It's fear. It is fear. Because my life is now over. Oh, what may happen to me after I am dead? And so he's saying,
I've been there.
Yeah.
I've been at the bedside where somebody was living with great trepidation with respect to what's going to happen in the next few moments after they die. And those were some of their final words. And can you imagine?
And Peter's saying here, I'm sorry, but it's not going to be good for the godless man when he dies. He may have flown through life, but and you Christians may have suffered much more than the godless man on this earth, but your ending is going to be a whole bunch better than his ending, and that's what I'm trying to tell you here. But verse 19 exactly. I mean, 19 is ending this whole thing, and that's what he's saying here. Trust God. Trust God that these things that are happening to you, trust Him. Trust your soul to Him. And be thankful that you have this hope to a faithful Creator. Yes. I mean, that term right there. Whatever's happening to you in this life, terrible things may happen to you, just understand. You who suffer this way, understand there's a faithful Creator out there who's going to take care of you. That's just, to the sufferer, he's saying this here to the ones that he's writing to. That's got to give them some comfort.
Yeah, and that's the point.
And that's the whole point.
And I think that's a good place to leave it. How about you?
I don't think we can do any better.
All right. All right, to all of you out there, thank you for being a part of our study. But to each of you who may be dealing with suffering, you're hurting, you've become discouraged, or you've had to endure abuse for the cause of Christ. Maybe it's caused challenges within your family or a relationship, or it's caused some heartache. You have a faithful Creator. And we want you to remember these words, know these words. This is Peter. This is Peter speaking to you through the Holy Spirit. Therefore, let those who suffer according to God's will entrust their souls to a faithful Creator while doing good. God bless you, and thanks for being a part of our study.
Good night, brethren.